Welcome back to Thursday Thoughts with Jake, a Bourbon Lens production, and we're excited to talk about one of my first true loves, and that's agriculture. If you don't know by now, I was an agricultural economics major at the University of Kentucky, and when bourbon and sustainability come together, I think it's one of the most important things we can talk about. So excited today to be joined by Brandon Corace. Hopefully I said that right. Yep. From Meridian Biotech, and you may have just seen a press release on the bourbonlens.com about what they're doing with Sazerac. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of Thursday Thoughts. Brandon, I'm sorry if I butchered your last name there. I do my best in my Kentuckian.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having us on.
Hey, I really appreciate it. This press release caught my eye, and we always like to give a lot of shout outs to our press teams that we get to work with. So the Sazerac team and Corey McCauley for putting this in front of us and allowing us to, know about this information, because I think it's vitally important. But before we get into the tech part, the growth part of the organization, every organization has a history and a story. So we'd love to know a little bit about your story and the history of your all's organization.
Yeah, we started the company in 2017. Really, we classify ourselves as industrial biotech. We get grouped into the pharmaceutical biotech, but we're industrial. And we've segregated ourselves that way just because of what our business model is. Essentially, we have proven this technology on different fermentation byproducts. Really started off in the ethanol industry, and then that's led us into other industries, the brewery, obviously, and then leading into Kentucky. So a lot of it was heavy R&D phase, as you can imagine. The technology has a kind of a hybrid between wastewater and a biological process. So as we've developed those, we started with one product and then into multi-functional products that can hit different markets and different industries. And so as we started developing the technology, that led us into a lot of other things, specifically with some of the grant funding opportunities that came up. Leading back to our early days, we had a product that essentially went into aquaculture. So for farm-raised aquaculture, specifically shrimp, salmon, we've tested on tilapia as well. And looking at those markets, as you can imagine, there's not a huge market here in the US. So some of our customers are based in Europe, Asia, South America. But really, that was the root of it. And understanding what is our competition in that market, who's doing what. And essentially, we realized that after multiple feeding trials, we've done everything from shrimp, salmon. We have probably 12 publications out there that are online through various universities. So we've kind of worked our way backwards. Some people, they'll go and build a facility and then, hey, who's my customer? We really were heavy on the R&D, and that was important for us. And that led into getting a NIH, National Institute of Health, phase 1 and phase 2, essentially for biomedical research. So not to go in all the technical details there, but essentially they are trying to look at a reference diet for all universities to use throughout the country. So a lot of support from NIH, and our partner down there was University of Alabama, Birmingham. They have a very good aquaculture department, and so it's led into these other things. Also getting a grant funding from a project we did with DARPA, so a defense agency. It was an interesting project. They were trying to make microbial foods only using air, water, electricity, and microbes.
Wow.
So that was kind of a collaboration we did with Johns Hopkins, and fun project. It got us a lot of good grant funding, and it sort of further validated what we were doing. We were on track to do something, and being a startup company back in the day where you don't have a lot of funding to get lab equipment and get some of this testing done. So that's kind of where we started with it. And then as I mentioned, we've always looked at different types of industries. Where's the need?
Yeah.
So not as much a need in the ethanol industry with their large facilities, and they look at that as they have a byproduct and that's part of their margins. And so that got us kind of involved with this bourbon reverse pitch, which happened at the end of 2021. and we kind of wrote a proposal on it. It was last minute, but we got the proposal in, and we were one of 5 companies chosen.
Wow.
So that gave us the opportunity to sort of, most of those companies I think were based in Kentucky or right outside, but it gave us the opportunity to sort of get in touch with these distilleries. So it opened up the door. That's all we needed. We knew we had something different here. As you can imagine, there are technologies out there, anaerobic digestion, other technologies that we've seen. We think it's good. We think it's good to have the competition. We think there's plenty of byproducts, as you can imagine. So we just stayed focused there. We had connections to multiple distilleries, and from the start, we've been working with Buffalo Trace on the R&D side. We sort of, their team was very receptive just from the standpoint of us coming in. We're not saying, hey, we're going to put this thing up tomorrow. We took them through the full timeline. Hey, here's the process. And I think that's important. We were very transparent with them. Their team is great. As you can imagine, they're really looking at this as a part of innovation, doing something a little bit different than. And I think as we decided, we were kind of shipping samples back and forth to our lab in Houston, and we were working on all these other projects. And as it became more important and we saw a need here, we decided to move some of our pilot operations up here in Lexington. And during that time, we were still testing some of the distilleries, but from the start, I think we felt very confident in, not the size of it, obviously, but just that relationship in general. And that led into us kind of getting involved with this.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting, right? And I think Buffalo Trace is ahead on a lot of distilleries with how they have their own, centrifuge to spin all that down and get, a little bit ahead of the curve when you're producing a byproduct. And a lot of the distilleries have done a great job working with local cattle farmers or ranch hands to get that back out. But they can only take so much of it, right? And there's still a lot more that has to be produced and processed. So when you were looking at partnerships in this early stages, did you all look for people that already had some type of sustainability process, or did you want to come in there and say, hey, would you take this whole new process on because we're taking it from a different innovative approach?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at a number of different ones, some that, didn't have the dry house capability, and then some that had it in. I think what we saw was just the bottlenecks that they had to deal with, shutdowns because of the back end of the process. And Buffalo Trace runs it very well. It's not to say that they can't do it. They're the top guys to do something like that, but it led into the need of finding a different solution than what is out there right now. And I think that has led into, other distilleries looking at other options as well. I think whatever works, there's a number of different ways that you can look at it, but we found that us basically producing products into different industries and looking at the markets are very large. Aquaculture being one of the biggest food sectors in the world, and obviously the pet food here in the U.S. So, and it's led us into, you know, as on the product side of things, like I said, we started with one. We've got multiple products now. And during COVID, it gave us an opportunity to further refine the process where we developed our products, True Fight, which is a organic fertilizer. So right in your sort of background, and that, like I said, we've continued to do the R&D. We haven't stopped there. And we will continue that, find efficiencies, find ways to improve the product, but we're not chasing anything at this point. It's proven. And so at this point, with the organic fertilizer, we're also working with universities. We work with University of Kentucky. They just completed a fertilizer sort of greenhouse study on our product, how it compares to MAP and DAP, what's out there on the market, and a replacement of that. And they'll be publicizing that. Very good results when it comes to the yield, potential other benefits of, how does it help the microbiome of the soil? So, and I think that's a product that can stay here in Kentucky, especially the western part of Kentucky. And, we see that as an opportunity for potentially people that are, providing wheat to distilleries, a full circular economy. I mean, when you talk about sustainability, there's a lot of things out there, yeah, as you can imagine, but we don't really stress that too importance of it. It's a natural way to look at it from a sustainability standpoint.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like some people will take the maker's mark approach and like go with the regenerative agricultural aspect. Some people might go with this and how do I control my spent waste? Um, or like how do I plant my own oak forest or all of those things, right? Sustainability can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think that's where, this part is very interesting because you're not just solving a problem from a distillery perspective. You're allowing Buffalo Trace to say, hey, you know what you're really good at? Producing bourbon.
Yeah.
We don't need to worry about the dry house component. Like, let you make bourbon. And then we can handle this for you. But not only that, we're going to give more options to the people out in the world to use this world-class grain that they're getting because they're not getting just run-of-the-mill, corn. They are getting, obviously yellow dent number two, probably corn and all those things, but they're getting high quality corn. They're getting high quality rye, wheat, barley. And that means higher quality ingredients for your pet food or for the aquaculture pieces. Or, here in Kentucky, we need all the fertilizer we can get with how like agrarian our society is still. And so I think that's really cool is, always being able to say this came from what this came from. It came from the earth and it goes back into the earth in a variety of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to touch on that, we're solving that issue on the distillery side and also with our customers. I mean, they're not just looking at this as, yes, the alternative protein market is catching on, and they're looking at it from a protein standpoint, but also the different properties. The utility of the product. It's multifunctional, especially in the pet food industry. In the aquaculture industry, our biggest competition is fish meal. Fish meal, what they're taking sardines, anchovies, pelagic fish from the ocean. They're bringing it on land and they're feeding it to farm raised. So how much does that have an impact on our ecosystem and moving forward? But the regulations are starting to come together where they're saying, hey, we have to take less fish meal in. It's very inconsistent. So that's a big problem for them. We're looking at that opportunity as not only solving it on the front end, but also our customers being able to supply them with a product that is, clean label. It is also considered, from a protein standpoint, the other properties that go into it. And, that's what we've worked on. So I think it's all of this coming to fruition now as we're developing this. And you mentioned before that there'll be opportunities as we scale the business. We're focused on this one. We've kind of put our blinders on and said, this is the project and we want to focus on this, but there will be other opportunities and every single one will be different, a different sort of a need from their end. Some of them don't have the capabilities to do it. So there's an even bigger need there. But we've done enough research, we've done enough of the R&D where we know we can produce the consistent product and have that production volume here in Kentucky.
Well, I think that's really cool. And one question I had, from an R&D perspective, I've done a lot of like meal packing and stuff, and we send alternative proteins, to other countries to feed children. Have you all looked at the application or started to do the R&D? Like, could this be a viable product to even give to a protein source for the homeless or the needy who need something, from an ulterior perspective?
Yeah, we're working on R&D for obviously with the NIH and everything we're doing there, and already have some aspects that are going into food. As you can imagine, there's some breweries and distilleries that are, just taking the grains and just drying them. At that, we're not doing that. We've got a proprietary process that we go through. But yeah, I mean, I think as we get in, there's a need for those developing countries too, and being able to supply this globally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's our plan. That's our vision down the road.
Yeah. Because, it's easy to like pigeonhole yourself, right? We are the aqua farm people or we're the whatever. And that's what I liked about the press release, what I could glean from it and, chatting with you is you're not trying to solve one problem. You're saying we have a source, research and the ability to produce a protein And maybe it could be different elements of that protein that go into different elements of a product.
Mhm.
That's what I like is you're creating a stream, from a capitalistic perspective, which is nice, but you're also creating a stream to impact multiple areas, right? So you're not pigeonholing yourself. And I think that's what I find really interesting about this overall, because those are the pieces, the behind the scene tour pieces, like not everyone gets like kind of giddy about that
Yeah.
when you go to a dry house and you see that, and then you realize only so much of that grain that created that, you know, X amounts of gallons of whiskey is actually used. There's a lot of spent grain left over. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of nutrients that are still available for some type of consumption.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a market for it, obviously, where a lot of it is being used in the cattle industry. I think one of the needs here is what we saw as we were doing the pitch competition. We saw that there is even more of a need as these distilleries expand, as they double in size. Is there enough cattle in Kentucky? Do they have to go out and get a different marketplace? And as you mentioned before, they just don't really, there's not a need for that to put the capital in and do it, and we have the expertise, we've got the technology to do it, so it's leading into kind of a win-win situation. And we do the heavy lifting on the back end, and they can continue to focus on what they're.
So can you walk me through this process? Because I find this to be another interesting thing is that you'll actually kind of pipe in, is what it said in the article, right? You're going to connect in. So grain gets used, stilled down, right? And then goes through the fermentation process and it's at its end. So how close will your all's property be to Buffalo Trace, and how far does that have to kind of like go, or is it tanker? Like, how does that process work? And then from the time you get it, second part of this, from the time you get it, how long does it take you all to do your process, then to then send it out to whatever product it's going to be?
Yeah, yeah, our business model has always been, let's eliminate the trucking. Let's eliminate trucking water out of these facilities. So our business model has been not from only that standpoint, but also consistency. Being able to not take from multiple distilleries, that's never been part of our project. And sort of a co-location is what we're looking for in pipeline. That's whether we're doing a brewery or whether we're doing a distillery. But essentially, pipelining over to our facility, we would then essentially for each product, we'd have independent processes for that. Goes through the process as we're getting to the stage. It's coming through. We're as you know, probably 99% water, so everything is in there. And then what we're doing is each individual process that we have designed it for, it's going through the process. It's then being dried on site and bagged on site. So all of it being dried powder, and then the trucking that we would have is for the first phase, 2 to 3 trucks per day. So essentially, it's coming in now. On the back end, you obviously have water. We are reusing a portion of that water, and then also the excess water is cleaned up to a point where it can go to the wastewater treatment plant. So not only producing the products, but clean water on the back end to where there's no higher fees with a wastewater treatment plant. We've even discussed with them. They've got a minimum that we got to be under. We're way under that. We're 4 times less than that. So it's not going to have a huge impact on these wastewater treatment plants, which is great. We got a lot of engineers, that's their background. So we're not, afraid to get into that category. And it's so essentially coming out the door, those would then go to our customers. We'd have multiple customers and different outlets for what they're looking for. And then as it goes to those customers, they're putting it into their formulation. So we're not selling directly to consumer. We're business to business. We've worked with our customers for the last 6 years on the R&D side. So they're ready to go. And like I said, there's a need for it. They appreciate that this is a different technology, but similar to the products they're already using. So they're plugging that into their formulation. We've got a long-term contract with it.
Yeah, I think that's the nice thing is there's an opportunity, and talk about like pet food manufacturers. There's a lot of them near Kentucky, right? You don't have to go very far to find that. I don't know much about the aquaculture
Yeah.
space. The only aquaculture thing I know is what I go see on the ride down at Disney, like that's next to Soarin', that where you get to live off the land or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And it's what you take a break and you You see their big aqua agricultural space food that they have, which is cool because they like raise all their own fish for everyone to eat on Disney's property. But that's about all I'm familiar with there. But I think it's super interesting what you all are doing, and I'm excited because sustainability only allows the next generation to experience what we're experiencing today. And without that, we would be creating a bigger problem. So kudos to you all for solving a need and joining a competition and
Yeah.
taking the most out of it.
Yeah. I mean, we're open to all opportunities, right now, like I said, we're focused. I think getting this first project up and running, we're going to be doing it in multiple phases. So we're in the project and we've held that comfort level, like I said. And coming to Frankfurt, we're excited. We've had a ton of support, governor, mayor, county judge, and other city officials too. So they've kind of embraced us with open arms as saying, we'll be the first biotech company in Frankfurt. We like to think that, we're bringing a lot more to the table, not just the production facility, but be able to recognize as we'll be doing R&D, working with Kentucky State, other universities. There's a need here. And I think over the next few years, it'll be exciting to kind of see how we grow, as we love being with the Sazerac Buffalo Trace. I think it's a win-win situation, like I said before. And I think they're at the top of the innovation, and they understand that that our process can help them, not deal with those bottlenecks that they have to deal with.
Definitely. And then just my one last question I have for you. When does phase one complete and when does phase four, we'll call it, when's that supposed to be completed?
Yeah, we're hoping to, sort of get everything. We're working final engineering and all that, and then hoping to get to breaking ground either by the end of this year or early next year. It's always tough around the holidays, as you can imagine. Breaking ground on that, and then we've given ourselves, 14 to 16 months to get the construction completed for phase one, and then we plan to phase that into 3 different phases. So it could change. We could go, larger, but that's kind of the comfort level we have right now. And I think it's important to show that, hey, let's get this first phase up and then expand from there. So I think we've got a good plan moving forward.
Because $40 million is not a small chunk of change for a startup organization.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we've been good with as far as getting all the other things in line, financing and all that structure. We've been working on that for the past year. So it's not as if we're falling into this and saying, now what do we do when we get this thing ready? So you got to have the technology side, you got to have the R&D side, and you got to have the business side. So the business model has to be key for this to work, and we've got the right people for it.
No, that's awesome. Well, Brandon, I'm super excited for what y'all are doing. Will be really excited once it gets up and going, and I'm sure
Yeah,
you will be as well.
yeah,
Really appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your time just to connect with us and share this really important message. Even though it's the very beginning, the fact that y'all are thinking about this and solving problems for Buffalo Trace now and for others potentially in the future, I think is really amazing. So kudos to what you all are doing, and excited to see what the future holds.
yeah. Well, we appreciate you having us on and, to discuss more about it. It's great to get the announcement out now. We've been working hard on our end, and our team has been great working with Buffalo Trace and their team members. So now it's rolling up our sleeves and getting it done.
Yeah, definitely. Well, really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Thursday Thoughts. We'll catch you next week. Cheers.